Okay, because there are times when I forget to hit record. So this entire meeting is also being recorded, and I will also send everyone a link to that as well. So there we go. And I just asked, people can hear us. So we are good to go. So Christine, the floor is yours.
All right, then.
And just speak up, speak slow, and they can't see you, but I will
You will click through the slides?
I will click through the slides, yeah.
All right, then. So, hello. Click. There we go. So the agenda for my presentation today is first go over why accessibility, why making your websites and your digital materials.
One second, I forgot. I'm passing this around. If you can please put your email address here if it's not already here, so that way I have everybody's name. Okay.
There we go.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. Why accessibility, why it's important to your user base, why it's important to everyone. A short intro into WCAG, which are the standardized rules for web accessibility developed by W3C. Some common inaccessible issues, things that generally are seen most commonly on websites. As a bit of a background into this, we're recently doing our first initial accessibility audit for Rutgers. We went over 70 sites. I'm currently going over the next 60. So a lot of these inaccessibility issues that I'm presenting are the ones that I see most commonly across those websites, but also just as a general user. As a warning, once you start looking into accessibility, it is like looking into the void, and you can never turn your eyes away from it. From there, I'll teach you guys how to do some basic accessibility checking, as well as references on where to learn more. Wow, you really don't like me, do you? Thanks, Google. So first, why accessibility? First of all, disabilities heavily affect web usage. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 1 in 5 individuals have a disability. This accounts for about 20% of your user base. The most ones that people talk about will be things like deafness, like blindness, like motor issues. But it also doesn't fully include people who have either invisible disabilities or disabilities that they don't know about. For example, I am a blind user, so there is my visual disability, but I also have ADHD and dyslexia, which is why you see me fidgeting with my cube here to keep me focused. But I also cannot properly read websites that have certain kind of text. Also, if you notice my words flipping, that is also due to my dyslexia. I mix up letters and I make up words doing that. Actually, another fun example is I've had 2 web developers during the point of our audit who were doing color blindness testing and soon realized, looking through filters, that the filters weren't changing. And then they realized that they were partially red and yellow colorblind during the process of, they never realized it because it was so slight. So it's interesting things like that. So the way that a lot of people with disabilities use the web is via assistive technology. Again, a lot of the common ones you're going to hear about are screen readers, tactile keyboards, but you also have to include there's a lot of different accessibility items that we don't account for that are commonplace, such as everybody wearing glasses in the room. This is assistive technology. You'll also have a lot of assistive technology that is used by commonplace people. Voice to text is one of the most normal ones that I like to use, especially for users who cannot use a keyboard. However, accessibility benefits everyone. The point of accessibility is not to make a special realm for people with disabilities in order to use the internet. It's in order to make everybody be able to use it, to get everybody up to speed, regardless of their age, regardless of their disability, what device they're using, what language they speak, what knowledge they have about using the internet. Accessibility is to make the playing field equal for everyone. And any sort of accessibility advancements that are made can be used by everyone. One of the most common examples I like to use is captioning. Does anybody use captioning when they're in a noisy space or they don't want to bother the people around them? You also have scenarios like all sorts of programming to make sure that people who can't use a mouse are commonly utilized in the technology for accessing our phones with our fingers. You also have, by making your sites more logical in both their navigation and their presentation, you're making the websites easier on people who may be easily distracted by me or may not be used to using the internet. Usually, I like to use KISS in this sort, keep it simple, stupid. Accessibility also provides an ease of use, efficiency, and versatility. It's basically good user design at its base. By tackling accessibility in the early stages of your development, you are already promoting good user design. A lot of accessibility rules, especially in WCAG, are also building off of making sure that it can be used by multiple devices. This includes laptops, computers, screen readers, etc. So it's also very good for making sure that you are developing with mobile design in mind. And it's also good SEO because search engines like Google are blind, deaf keyboard users. Depending on the institution you're part of, it may also be legally mandatory. For Rutgers, since we are a government-based institution, we are a public school, and we get federal funding, we are one of the many groups that is covered under the ADA. Back in 2010, the Justice Department said that the internet was considered to be public space under Title II, and therefore, if you are getting federal dollars, you have to be what is known as 508 compliant. Now, at one point in time, which is interesting because this has been very recently, 508 had not been updated since about 1998, which meant that a lot of the rules that had been behind it were incredibly outdated, especially given the vast amount of advancements that had happened with the internet. Actually, as recently this past January, they updated it to incorporate W3C's rules on WCAG, which means that any sort of public or internal website for an institution like a federal agency or a state school getting government funding has to make sure that their websites, their digital documents, and their softwares are all accessible, or have some sort of alternative if it is required. So I've mentioned WCAG a couple times. Question around the room. Does anybody have any idea what I'm talking about when I mention WCAG? Yeah. There we go. Yes. I hope you would, Eddie.
Make him tell you
I won't call him out like that. So WCAG stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These guidelines were developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, also known as W3C. The consortium is not a government institution. It's not related to any sort of country around the world. It's actually a very large internet community in which their goal is to make guidelines and to streamline rule set for developing websites. Part of this initiative is they made the Web Accessibility Initiative in order to create guidelines and rule sets specifically for making website code more accessible. It is specifically made for content developers, web developers, and anybody who's looking to make their websites more accessible. Their rules can vary since it covers the broad span. So I know a lot of people in the room probably only are working on the front-end content, filling the boxes, and then we also have the people in here who are making said boxes for them to fill. So as a warning, if you're only wearing one of these hats, WCAG can be a little overwhelming. Most commonly, WCAG is known as WCAG 2.0. That is the most recent published version. 2.1 is supposed to be coming out, I learned a week ago, next month. And a lot of the development that they're doing for this is building up for mobile accessibility, since a lot more users are moving to mobile devices, and this also heavily includes disabled users. But they're also building up more rule sets for low vision users, as well as those like me who have cognitive and learning disabilities. WCAG 3.0 is also in development, but last I checked, there is no official timeline. They're hoping within the next couple of years. The backbone of WCAG is built on 12 guidelines, and they are organized under 4 different principles, which is called poor. Going into the guidelines would take me about another hour and a half, so I'm only going over the basic examples so that you have the questions in your mind when you're working on your materials. The first one is it perceivable? Are users able to get the information regardless of their senses? Can a blind user still have their screen reader read the content for them? Can a colorblind user still be able to access functions if it's color-coded? Can a keyboard user still be able to navigate and see the content presented to them? Can a low vision user zoom in at 200% and still be able to use your website? The next question, which I realized I mixed them up a little bit, is also operable. Can a user operate the interface, there is my dyslexia, without hindrance? The better example for this, can the user zoom in at 200% and not completely break your website? Can I access your website on my cell phone? Can I access my website using Internet Explorer on a Windows 95? No, I'm kidding. IE6. IE6. Oh, no. Can you use it on IE8? That's the actual question. Is your website understandable? Can the user understand the information and the site operations? Do they know what portions of your forms are mandatory? A common issue I found of this, can a screen reader find the submit button? Do I know what the search box is actually supposed to be? And finally, robust. Can any user access the content regardless of the tool that they're using? Can I use it on my phone? Can she use it on her Dragon Speaking? Can I use it on JAWS? And so on and so forth. So these are the questions in which put you into the mindset, okay, can all of my users be able to find the information that they're looking for? Can they read it? Can they see it? And can they actually interact with it?
Question. So how do you determine what is perceivable, operable, and understandable? I mean, are there specific guidelines to follow to make sure that you're within?
Yes. So they use POUR as like the overlying chapters of the guidelines, but inside that is all of the specific rules that's for coding. So it would be something like, I believe in understandable, it would be, okay, make sure your form has enough say that says, okay, this is a mandatory requirement. So the guidelines breaking down into those subdivisions, and then there are subdivisions within the subdivisions. I will warn you, WCAG is larger than War and Peace. I'm not even kidding about that. But one of the nice things is that they've been able to break it down further to make it more usable by people who don't have the attention span of a rabbit like I do. However, we're going into compliance first. So I forgot that's the next slide. So compliance for WCAG. So within WCAG, they have set 3 bars in which to say, okay, you are reaching this level of compliance by reaching these guidelines. So certain guidelines are labeled under A, under AA, and AAA. The best way that I've been able to tell people to imagine the A's is by trying to figure out who they're leaving behind if they don't reach the bar. So for single A, if you are not reaching the guidelines set under that, your users aren't able to access the information easily. You are leaving users behind. People aren't just struggling. There is information that they can't access at all. I will give a common example of this, which I kind of mentioned before. We had a complaint submitted from a user with a screen reader who was trying to submit a form in order to change their major. Filled out the entire form, got all the way to the end. Unfortunately, none of the buttons were labeled properly. So all she had was button link, button link, button link, and she didn't know which one was the submit button. So she got all the way to the end of the form, and because of this one button, she couldn't submit it. Thankfully, she contacted administration. It got solved really quickly. Someone just threw the paperwork through for her. But, this is a barrier in front of her that made her completely unable to use the website effectively. AA is the minimum standard that everybody reached. This is the good baseline. If you are not reaching AA, your users are struggling but still able to get the information. They're still able to figure out to get from A to B. I had a life lesson from a screen reader user at one point, 99% blind, that a lot of times, especially over the years, because accessibility has not been commonplace on the internet, and it's recently become a thing. I mean, within the past 2 years, I'm talking more about accessibility than the 4 years I've been here in this job. And a lot of them have found hacks in getting around information and getting around inaccessible materials. But by making sure that you reach AA, you're making sure that they don't need to hack their screen readers to figure out where they need to go. AAA is going above and beyond. Not only are you trying to make sure that the minimum barriers are removed, you're taking the extra step to make sure, okay, I want to make sure that I have ARIA labels on all of my things so that my screen reader users have an easier time in accessing this. I want to make sure that keyboard tabbing is a lot easier for my keyboard user. I want to make sure that my color palette is completely accessible regardless of what kind of color blindness or what kind of vision you have. So those are the bars for compliance. WCAG W3C has a lot of offerings on their website. They have a W3C Y overview, which is sort of their directory into everything WCAG. This includes not only at a glance, which is a very basic understanding of WCAG in the way of what is poor, what are the guidelines. They also break down into, okay, I'm a content developer. What do I actually need to care about? Because there are a lot of things that certain people have only a certain amount of access to in their website, in their CMS, etc. They also have the quick reference guide, which I especially say is very good for developers and content developers. Because it not only gives you a very good too long didn't read of WCAG, but it also allows you to search based on what level of compliance are you trying to reach. Are you trying to just tackle colors? Are you just trying to tackle hyperlinks? And from then on out, it gives you the overview of what the small bit of that guideline is, but then it also allows you to dig down deeper into all the examples that they have and all of the different ideas that people have come up with. They also have the full rule set of WCAG. Unless you have like 4 days on your hand, I wouldn't advise reading through it, especially since it's written in a lot of legalese too. So I struggle reading through WCAG fully. And then they also share any of the upcoming updates that they have for WCAG. So anything that they have about 2.1, everything they have about 3.0, and so on and so forth. So moving on from WCAG. I'd like to go over some basic common accessible issues and how you can actually tackle them right now. The first biggest issue that I see is colors and color contrast. When I talk about color contrast, I mean the difference in luminosity between two colors. How well can everybody see red text on black text? The answer is very poorly. This affects all of your users. It especially affects users who can't distinguish luminosity, they can't see the outlines of words or graphs or images, and people with color blindness. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is as you age, your ability to see luminosity declines greatly. So a lot of older users struggle with colors a lot more than someone like me who is only turning 30. Some of the common items that are affected are text on backgrounds, the link button hover states, so when you hover or focus over something, the changes in color in that, any sort of tables, graphs, or charts, and any sort of labeling via color. For color contrast solutions, the first thing that you want to do is you want to check your color contrast. See what your text color and what your background color are and put it through some sort of checker to see if you're reaching a good luminosity. Accessible Colors is one of my favorite applications for this because of its simplicity. You put in the hex code of the text color, the size, and if it's bold, because that is important, and the background color, and it gives you if you pass or fail based on the level you're trying to reach. Not only that, it gives you a slight hexadecimal change either to the font color or to the background color to actually bring it up to compliance. So it gives you that ability to go, okay, this isn't accessible, but if you change this by like 6 points, you're now accessible. Another good thing to do is to actually learn what it is like to access your website and your computer with a type of color blindness. Color Oracle, which is available for both Windows and Mac as well as Linux, is a simple plugin that just puts a filter on your screen that allows you to see different color blindnesses. So you can access your screen with no red cones or no blue cones or no color cones at all. This is especially good for screenshots, I've learned, when you want to send examples to your developers going, I'm having trouble seeing this text on this because of this filter. I think we need to change it a little bit. Another good solution for text and image backgrounds is making sure that there is a backup color if you're utilizing an image background. And this is primarily for people who may turn their images off. I am one of these people. I get easily distracted by images and moving pictures. So I generally turn my images off when I navigate websites. And if there is a white text on a black textured background and I turn off that textured background, I now have white on white, and it's not fun. So this is also very good too for computer checkers, but I will go over that in a little bit longer.
How do you turn off an image?
So browsers have the ability in their settings to completely disable image usage. So you ever use a website and your internet craps out and then all you have are all the broken things? Mm-hmm. That's what it looks like to me. And as long as I have alt text, I can see what those images look like. Another important thing to think about with colors is making sure you're not relying on them completely. Examples of this are your hyperlinks. If you have a hyperlink inside of a body of text, it should be visually different from its surrounding text outside of color. And this is because someone with a certain color blindness or luminosity might not be able to tell that a hyperlink is a hyperlink because it happens to be red. In some cases, this could be bolding them. This could be the classic underlining them, putting a border around them. Just make sure that whatever style you use is also not used for something else on the website. So if you decide to bold your hyperlinks, don't use bold for emphasis because people might assume that it is a hyperlink. Any of your buttons or links or anything that has a hover state or focus state should also have a change that is outside of color for the same reasoning, so that people know that the state has changed outside of color. Any sort of labels and symbols should be different outside of color. Again, don't rely on color because some people can't see them. Any sort of directions on your site, you should also never rely on color. A fun example I had learned at the WebAIM conference was they had a list of mushrooms that were poisonous. And the poisonous ones were red and the not poisonous ones were green. So directions like this are, press the green button to continue. What if I can't see green? Color changes can be used, however, so long as they reach a luminosity, so long as it's an obvious color state change. The example that I like to use for this is a button that is black that has white text in it. An obvious color change would be a complete swap. So now the button has a black border and the text in the button is black. It is obvious that the colors have changed in that hover state.
I have a quick question
yes.
with all of that. What about the underlining? A long time ago, usually if something was underlined, you knew it was a link. Now, a lot of websites are moving away from that. Is it actually recommended to go back to that concept? Because that is not a color.
So there's no official ruling on this, but I also understand why people have went away from underlining in the design world, and it's because it's new and it's shiny and we can do so much more. But usually I advise the underlining because underlining has always been so synonymous with hyperlinks. And I remember when I learned in web design courses, you shouldn't use underlining and styling because it's so synonymous with hyperlinks. So I always love going back to the good old underline. And it also is really good for users who might be older, and it also started with the internet a long time ago, and they still haven't grasped the fact that hyperlinks can look like anything nowadays. So the next issue I'd like to go over is hindering keyboard usage. This mostly affects anybody with any sort of motor issues who may be utilizing a keyboard or accessible issue, or somebody whose battery ran out on their mouse. I've had that happen to me. Even though I realized that in that up there, a lot of the, I add it later, but I'm going to mention it now, a lot of the keyboard locking too can also greatly affect screen reader users because they technically navigate in the same way. So a lot of fixing via keyboard may also really boost screen reader usage at the same time. Some of the...
What is keyboard locking?
Keyboard locking is, so some applications and some sites decided to completely disable keyboard usage on their website. So you can hit any key you want and nothing will happen.
So how do you do that?
Well, you either have a mouse or you don't. I see that problem most commonly with software-based applications or website-based applications. But people do make the choice that they don't want their users using their keyboard and decide to disable it.
Or screen touch, right?
Or
They assume it's,
yeah,
it's touch screen.
Yeah, there's also that. That is also valid. Some of these common issues include an invisible focus state, which I'll go over on the next slide, having hyperlinks or buttons that are hover only, which means it requires a mouse in order to access it, a lack of a skip navigation, having a logical tab order, meaning as a user tabs through the website, they're bouncing around because the order makes no sense. Using site unique keyboard commands. Some users developers decide to add unique commands in order to help their keyboard users, but they may also inadvertently be hindering other users, especially screen reader users, to which use keyboard commands in order to use their tools. And they also completely lock out the keyboard. So this is actually probably the biggest issue I find on the internet, period, is keyboard. So as a keyboard tabs through a website, what's known as the focus pops up over it. So browsers have a default styling of focus if you ever decide to go and test it, which is usually a little blue border that goes around it. In CSS, which is the style guides, you should make sure that any sort of interactive item, being a hyperlink, a button, anything, has both a hover state and a focus state, and that its styling is very visible on the website. I've also seen some accessibility websites actually build up on their focus state to make it more obvious than a hover state because the user is trying to follow where their focus is going, so they make it more obvious either by highlighting it, by making a bigger border. There are also different, some users are using different Java and JavaScript tools so that you can actually see the box physically move across the screen, which makes it much easier for the user.
Hold on one second. Does everyone understand what she's talking about with the gaining focus? Anyone have a question? No. Okay. So if you vision a website, so you have a menu, and you click on the home, right? Prior to clicking on it, if you use your tab key, a focus means when the keyboard, basically if you hit return, it will emphasize, it will run, okay? So what she's talking about is having some kind of border around that icon when you land on it. So you know that's what is going to happen. Sometimes you may see like a submit button, might get like a little blue square on it, so you could just hit your enter key. That's what's using the tapping around. Am I explaining that?
Yeah.
Right. Does that help? So.
Yeah, and that also is for hyperlinks. So you could be tabbing through content, and you'll get that little blue box that shows, hey, this is something that's clickable. And that's what the focus state is to show a keyboard user, this is clickable. You can click on this.
So I understand the focus, that when you, let's say, fill out all the fields on a screen, and then you filled out all the required fields, then the submit button shows in bright blue or with a box or something, and then you could just hit enter and it will.
Yep.
But what's
Hover is so when a mouse goes over it in the same way. So a mouse interacting is hover because the mouse is hovering over it, and the keyboard tabbing is the focus. Does that make sense?
When you've got a mouse hovering over it, let's say that you're on a menu bar at the top and it shows you a drop down. And this is an area where I run into problems.
This is an area where everybody does.
Is the hover focus, because once I then tell my voice recognition software that I want to select one of the items in the drop down, it often doesn't recognize the text, but sometimes I can say move down 3 and it'll bounce down to the third item, and sometimes it'll just disappear and it doesn't
visually show up.
I can't use it.
Yep. Drop down menus are the bane of my existence too in terms of accessibility, and that's because a lot of them are built for mouse users. They're built so that the change of them physically dropping down requires a mouse hovering over them, and it doesn't have a backup of it realizing that a keyboard can tab over it or your device can tab over it.
Well, but there's mouse control on. I don't want to go too far into it. I'll let you keep going.
Would it be better to have a list of something, but then you still need to click it with the mouse, right? And instead of a drop down, you just have like number 1 and the list of the items instead of scrolling through.
So with drop down menus, one of the ways you can do it is making sure that when it receives either hover or focus, so if a user uses a mouse, have the drop down activate as it normally does, and then allows the keyboard to cycle through the menu. I've also seen some really nice keyboard menus where you tab through the top level instead of going through every single list item, and then allow the use of arrow keys in order to go from item to item to item. Or it actually needs some drop-down menus I've seen in which for keyboards they have something that signifies that it needs to be expanded. So you have to click it before or enter it before it actually opens up. There's a lot of different variations people can do.
I know that drop-down menus can be problematic when you're using your phone.
Yep.
They don't work.
Yep. So that's another thing too. So making sure things are accessible. So in those cases, a lot of developers will make it so that it's a new menu for the mobile, and it requires you to open it up usually via what's known as the hamburger, which is those 3 lines, the hamburger, and it requires that sort of input to go, okay, open this up, close this up, and it actually requires, so that you are not reliant on needing a mouse on your phone. So moving on from that, again, as we mentioned, avoid any sort of hover-only scripts, which disable both the keyboard and phone usage, but also make sure that your tab order is logical. Most common way to do that is make sure your content is in order in HTML in the code, in the correct order. But also make sure that if you are doing any sort of responsive styling that does put divs in weird places, to make sure that the tabbing order is in focus that way. And again, the previous 2 tips here are really good for screen readers and other accessible devices.
So should the tab order be top, left to right?
Yep, it should be
like you're reading.
Yes, the reading of the language that is on the page. So in case you're building any Arabic sites, you should be doing it the other way. Another thing I mentioned before was skip to content. This is a AA thing. This is sort of which also leans on AAA. It's sort of a bonus, but it can really, really help out a keyboard user. Skip nav and skip to content are links that are at the very, very beginning of the tab order, to which gives the ability for keyboard users to jump the navigation.
the middle of the screen. So if you visualize the website, so that way you can, if you're on the About or whatever, you want to get right to the content, to the middle. So that's what she's talking about, to jump over to there.
So usually how a lot of people program it is they make sure that the first tab that comes up brings a box from outer space and pulls it onto the screen. It'll say something like skip nav or skip to content or anything. There are also, you can have multiple skips at this point, especially if you have multiple items. So I've seen ones that may have like a lot of Rutgers page have the Rutgers main navigation and then the internal navigation, and they may have a side navigation. So they may actually have a skip main navigation, skip to main navigation, skip to secondary navs, and skip to main content. And what this does is it takes the tab and it goes, okay, I'm not going to force you to tab through every menu order, and I'm just going to take your tab focus via an anchor link and just throw you right into that box, so that you can start your tab order from there. Does that make sense? I know one of the struggles I have with explaining things is that I am a developer and I easily adapt to things, so trying to layman is a little hard for me at times. Yeah.
Easier to see it.
Yeah.
Do you have a website that you know that does the skip to nav?
I do.
Not on here. Do it up there.
Yeah, you do it.
And I'll do it on here.
There we go.
Is it okay if would you guys mind if she just showed an example? Would that be helpful? Okay. All right. I'm going to do it here.
Okay. New window. Here we go.
Either a bad example or a good example. And don't use Rutgers. No.
Yeah, no, I would use WebAIM. Okay. Just, what did I type?
All right. So WebAIM.
WebAIM. WebAIM is, they're from the University of Utah. They're probably one of the longest standing institutions in terms of web accessibility in the United States, and they have a whole lot of resources. And one of the reasons I like to put out WebAIM is that they wrote everything for laymen. They write things that are specifically both for web developers, for content developers, for people who might be just making accessible PDFs and accessible Word documents. And a lot of the stuff that they have is meant for simplicity, but everything that they do is also AAA. So it shows up. It's a little hard to see on these big screens, but you saw the pop-up box that came up there? I think this is the only one.
Did you hit your tab
to
make that happen? Okay. Nice. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep. And so from there, I could hit the Enter key, and that takes me to the main content. And then from there, I can continue tabbing. And this is one of those examples I was saying before, that they have a specific thing that bounces to show you the direction that it's going to. And it highlights every box to make it very obvious of where you are.
So then how would you then go to the page after you tab, you hit enter?
Yep.
Okay.
So if I wanted to continue to this survey of web accessibility, I can just hit the Enter key, and I am on this page with no content. Great job.
But you can also see the blue focus box as you're hitting the tab, okay, as you hit the tab through.
So you can see it there around the WebAIM. So that's an interactive link. That's an interactive link.
And then once you're at a place and you hit your Enter key, then it takes you there.
Awesome.
Does that help?
Good.
There we go.
So can you use your arrow keys to get around?
Yeah.
Hit tab, then arrow key. Now this one, when I hit tab, the arrows
keys
are
are disabled on the site. Interesting. That's weird. What are you doing, WebAIM?
Only the tab, but the tabs do work.
No, I'm just having an issue with Chrome. Interesting. Chrome, what did you do? There are also weird accessibility issues when it comes to browsers, and this is a constant struggle. So, like, I recently learned that I can't use VoiceOver in the new Mozilla at all, and that was very interesting, learning that. All right. Let's throw back into the presentation.
When you're talking about VoiceOver, you're talking about something like Dragon?
I don't know if Dragon, technically speaking, is actually a screen reader. Yeah, it's certainly not a screen reader, right?
Can you use Dragon? I mean, because my husband wants to do something like that. To browse the internet or anything like that.
Yeah, I use Dragon all the time.
Yeah.
And you can tab for much, but it's so dependent on what developer puts together because some are very good at that following that standards and some are not. And Chrome, it's about a month-by-month basis.
Yeah, that can happen. VoiceOver is a screen reader specifically built into Apple devices. So I do have a slide about screen readers later on, so I will discuss those as well. So going to skip the content. That's right. I have to. What did I click? I can't see my mouse from here. What did you do?
Go back. There you go.
No, it's.
Go to that.
Hey, okay.
All right, what page are you on? Because I'm doing the same thing as
Hold
you.
on. Okay, I am. It's all right. Inaccessible link content.
Yep, we're there.
Cool. All right. So inaccessible link content, this is specifically for my content developers as well. This affects everybody, but it does disproportionately affect your screen reader users. Most of these common issues are using vague hyperlinks, which we've become so commonplace in using, like click here, read more, any sort of clickable object without a label on it, and any sort of image links that don't have alternative text. And I'll go more into alternative text later, but the first thing I want to go over is that you should make sure that your links are meaningful. Imagine your hyperlinks and your links in your content being like road signs on a highway. You want your user to know where they're supposed to be going regardless of the content around it. So an example I have here is the click here for the presentation and see our accessibility presentation slides. I also threw in a little funness there that I italicized to the accessibility presentation slides so that anybody with a color blindness would know the difference between the hyperlink and the text around it. I just didn't use underlining because I am using that for the rest of my presentation and I don't want to confuse users. Mostly you never want to assume that your user has actually read the content and knows where that click here link is supposed to go. Anybody hear those stories of people spending $400, $500 on an Xbox box on eBay because they didn't read what the content of it actually was?
That's funny.
Yeah, you should never, ever, 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 ever assume that your users are actually reading what you're putting forward. But one of the reasons why this heavily hurts screen reader usage is screen readers have the ability to list a lot of things in order to navigate. Basically, think of anything you can present on your website, and they probably have the ability to list it. One of the most common ones is to list hyperlinks. So imagine interacting with a website in which has a full set of links that say, click here, read here, click here, click here, click. They have no idea what those hyperlinks are supposed to be and would have to navigate to that content and read the content in order to get the context for it. Another thing is to avoid any sort of duplicate links on a website, especially if they're labeled differently. This is a mixture of good search engine optimization, but it also kind of is, it reduces the amount of baggage that a screen reader user has to go through in order to navigate your website.
Do you mean on one specific page?
Oh, one specific page.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if in your content you have a link to your presentation, don't link to the presentation in the next paragraph down.
Okay.
Like once a week.
Yeah, try to stick to once on a page.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you're putting a link to it on the right side in a module, right, and then also putting it in
the
middle of the
content,
it's probably not a good idea.
That's not okay.
No.
That one is a gray area.
Okay.
It's mostly meant for content, like avoid it outside the content. And this is less of a you cannot do the thing, and this is a really good thing you should do for your users. So this isn't like a hard barred no. This is a think about your users. Another important one, which is the biggest faux pas I see in emails, don't share full URLs.
What do you mean by that?
So by full URLs, I am meaning if you are trying to link to Google, do not share http://www.google.com. Label it Google and then put the hyperlink in there. That is what they are meant for.
Okay. So what's displayed on the screen should not say www.google.com. What's displayed should just say Google. Or click here for Google.
Yeah.
And the link is behind it.
Yeah. Visit Google. Yeah. Visit Google.
Okay.
Let me Google this for you. My favorite plugin. But that is especially for the fact that not only are you wasting your sighted users' time in needing to read out a full URL to figure out what it's supposed to be, but you are especially wasting a screen reader's time who has to read every single letter. It has to go http://www.pleaseknow.com. And the next issue I want to go over, as I mentioned before, is alternative text. So what I mean by alternative text is this is an HTML code that is added, that can be added to anything, but it's specifically meant for site images. So the way that it looks in HTML is alt equals and then the two parentheses. And those aren't parentheses, those are quotations. And you put content inside of the alt text. This mostly affects screen reader users, but it also affects users like me who like to turn off images. When I turn off all my images, what is displayed in that's left is the empty box where it was supposed to be and the alternative text to tell me what that image was supposed to be.
Can we do an example of that on WebAIM? Do they have an image page on WebAIM? Because some people may not know the HTML code that you're talking about.
Oh,
do you have a page that has alt text?
I actually have an example on the accessibility site. I keep doing that.
Yes.
I have an example on the accessibility site. So just do accessibility.rutgers.edu. Go to web accessibility. I can't read it from there. Quick review checklist. And there's a section on images.
Yep.
I can't scroll at all. What is going on?
There's no, I'm just using my down.
Oh, no. The issue that I'm having is that this is reversed to how I use it. So I'm not sure how well you can see this, so let me zoom. I'm on a Windows keyboard.
So let's see the example.
I'm on a Windows keyboard. Crap.
So this is a video. So just because there's alt text doesn't mean it's hover text, right? It doesn't mean it's...
Yeah, it's not hover text. That would be the title tag. That's completely better.
Okay. So on her page right here, and this is through accessibility.rutgers.edu, there is a page of just different examples of how different images will show up with the screen reader. So I'm just showing my people offline just like this. So I have an image here, and then if I hit play, but they can't see it. Yes. So if you hit play.
Student works on computer at the Center for Digital Filmmaking.
Okay. So that is what the alt text says specifically on that image that I have there on that
So
screen.
that way you can see how the alt text is actually working. That's very cool.
So, and I also have examples of some more complicated things. So I was going to mention this on my slide, but since I'm here and I've copied and pasted my own material, complicated graphs are usually the ones that people also get really confused about. How do I alt text this? Well, the basic way to do it is making sure that you have an alternative somewhere that tells the user what the graph is supposed to display, some sort of layman, or even in details like this pie chart has this percentage to this percentage to that, and then your alt text tells the user.
Line graph showing value over time. Click for expanded breakdown. Internal link.
Oh, the link is broken now because we moved over websites, so that link actually doesn't work. And so in this example, you tell the screen reader user that it's a graph that has a lot of information and where they can find that information. The main reason you do this is because a screen reader has the ability to navigate content. Screen readers do not have the ability to navigate alternative text. It reads out and they cannot stop or start it in any form. So if you try to explain an entire pie chart in an alternative text, they may have to listen to it several times in order to figure out what you're trying to convey in full.
Okay. So in summary, it's better to put a paragraph below the image
Yes.
with the full example or just above the image, right? Either one.
Or linked into the image, just somewhere that tells the user, and you tell the user
about the image. The alt text is really referencing this is what the image is about, but like with this graph, if you want to say, see, at this time the volume is higher or whatever, a brief summary would be better done in a text below it, which a lot of times on a lot of our websites we don't do.
Yeah.
So we can, right now it's 11:30, so we have this room till 12, so I said we're going on till 12, so if anyone needs to leave now, you're welcome to, but I want her to keep going, so keep going.
How much more time do you need?
I probably need the full half hour.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, keep going.
Yep. I wanted to make sure I could give you everything.
It's okay.
It's
Yep.
very good. Very good.
There we go.
Keep going.
So as we discussed before for the graph, trying to figure out what to put into your alt all depends on the type of image. If it's relevant to the content, like it's important to the content around it, a lightly descriptive way, avoid usage of image of, because the screen reader will tell them that it is an image. If it's visual decoration, if it's meant there just for visual fluff, you still add the alt there, but you don't put anything between the quotations. What this does is when a screen reader hits it, it already knows that it is meant to be a decorative image because of that context. So it doesn't even bother, it skips it over, and the user can continue going through the content. If it is a link or a functional image, like social media buttons are probably one of the most common I see, you either tell them where that link is supposed to go, you say Facebook, Twitter, or if it has a function like the magnifying glass on a search bar, you tell them, search Rutgers website, search this page, search this content, and so on and so forth. You give them direction as to what that's supposed to be. We went over the chart and graph. If you have a logo that has text in it, you just put the text in the logo, so Rutgers University, OIT, if that's in there. However, side note, unless it is a logo, which logos kind of get the pass on basically everything accessibility, they get a free pass on everything. They don't have to be color compliant. They don't have to be certain sizes, and that's because there's too much legality behind logos than there is behind accessibility. If you have text, it should be presented as text. You should not put an image of text forward. So a small example I've seen pretty commonly is people posting fancy lists of their hours of operation as an image, when they could just use styling and have it as plain text, which is copyable, which is highlightable, which is screen reader usable. Another constant issue we have here at campus is people scanning letters and emailing them to people as images. I've contacted that office. They already know.
I don't know what you're referring to.
Some of the letters that we would be getting from like Barbara's office, which is just a scan of her letter, and it's just an image of that.
They scan that piece of paper and email you the scan.
Yeah, they email me an image of this.
Well, meanwhile, you have all the links, so you're not getting any of your links.
You're getting none of the text, none of the links, nothing.
You can't highlight it. You can't, and a screen reader has no idea what it is.
Can the screen reader read the PDF?
Yes. If the PDF is not an image. So, say for example, you scanned a document. And it saved the PDF as an image. Then no, it cannot read it.
If you scan with OCR.
Yes. Either with OCR.
But if you make a PDF from the Word document, that's okay.
Yes. All right, moving on. The last issue I want to go over, which is a simple one, is for our developers and for our content devs, make sure that you are using proper HTML. Not all your browsers, not all your devices are able to hack their way through your code issues. And this can greatly impact a user's experience. This affects everybody, but it incredibly affects the people who are using screen readers. Some of the most common issues that you'll have here are related to your headers, your lists, your page titles, your landmarks, your tables, and your page language, which is one of the ones that nobody knows about. The baseline solution for this is to use, for our developers, use HTML5. HTML5 was developed with accessibility in mind. A lot of the code that they implemented in there was to help replace the divide that was between ARIA and HTML, which I'm not even going to touch ARIA because it's a completely different conversation, but also to simplify code and make it easier for screen readers to update to the new HTML. How do you do this? Well, the first big one is you make sure that your headers are in order. And if you are using headers, like if you are using any sort of stylized text, make sure that it is in a header and it isn't just a span that is bold and enormous. And also make sure that they are visually different from the rest of the text and from each other so people can understand where the hierarchy in your content is. This one I especially put forward because headers is the #1 way that people tend to navigate, with screen readers tend to navigate websites. The first list that they usually pop up is, show me all the headers so I can figure out which section I need to go to. Going on from that, if you are making a list, use HTML list codes. Do not use symbols next to it and typography symbols next to it because, again, not only can it easily break on multiple browsers and especially on cell phones, but it also makes it hard for screen readers who have the ability to go list item, list item, list item, list item. And then you don't have to worry about figuring out alt text for your typography symbols. If you have a website page, which you do, make sure that the title is descriptive and tells the user where it is. Don't just use the name of your website for every single page on your website. Imagine trying to look at multiple tabs of your website on your browser. If you can't distinguish one from another, you have a problem. If you are using HTML5, make sure to utilize the different landmarks that they have available, such as the main landmark, the nav landmark. These not only make it easier for development, but it also is utilized by screen readers. I can't believe it's 2018 and I still need to say this. Use tables for tables and not for web design. I'm still fighting them. It's 2018. Please stop.
So again, some people may not understand. So if your goal is to put an image to the left and a nice little text to the right, that probably shouldn't be with the table. Even if it's easier to do it that way, use div tags instead to organize that content. Where a table should be tabular content, you have a list of professors and their phone numbers. That is columnar content. That's what a table should be used for.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That one just makes me cringe, so I explode on that one every time. Also, the secret one that a lot of people don't know, at the beginning, for developers, at the beginning of your page, make sure you declare a language on your HTML tag. It's 9 characters. For English, the letters are EN, but there is a huge text code that you can find from W3C that gives you, I think they're up to about 130 languages that you can declare. And if you have any variations, like you have a website that's like mostly in English, but you're also translating into Spanish on certain pages, you can label your span tags with that language as well. The reason why this is important is it's good for browsers especially to be able to go, okay, I know that this page is in English. If my user is using some sort of translator like Google Translate in Chrome or another translating tool, I already can go, okay, this is English, I know now to translate this to their language. This is also very good for screen readers. Users who use screen readers in different languages can have their screen reader translate the text so long as the page has been declared what that language is supposed to be. The tool can assume only to a point what the language is supposed to be.
How do you do that? In HTML?
In language? They don't, Rutgers, you wouldn't be able to adjust.
I'm just curious how it works because I have gone to like pages that says use Google Chrome to translate the page, and I was just curious how that worked.
So the way it is at the very beginning of every website, the first code says HTML to tell the browser it's HTML. That little lang tag there, you put that there and you put the language there, and that's it. Yep, it's the easiest fix, and it's one of the most common ones I get in all of my screening. It was like, nope, just put this tag there, and you're done. It's the easiest fix. So the next thing I definitely want to give you guys before we're done is accessibility testing. First of all, scanning software tools. This is using robots in order to find your code issues. The ones that I especially like for my developers, Axe by DQ. It is one of the most powerful rule sets that is available on the internet right now. They've got a Firefox and Chrome plugin, so you can go to your website and using the tools, the developer tools, and just scan it. And it gives you the issues it finds, where the issues are, and why it's a problem, why it affects your users, and how you can potentially fix it. They also have a GitHub and an NPM for those who want to install it into the back end of their website, but I am a web designer before a web developer, so I have not touched those yet. For my content providers, I definitely push for Wave, which was developed by WebAIM. Not only do they have a site tool where you can just plug in your URL and it will scan the page, but you can also install a Firefox and Chrome plugin to which you open up the plugin, you hit scan on your website, and it presents to you the issues it found and the same results. The reason why I separate this is that Axe is more powerful and it digs into a lot more code and a lot more of specific issues. Wave is developed specifically for laymen. It's very visual. It points out everything without you having to look physically at the code. Like, it highlights everything on the page. They flag everything. So it's very good for people who are not familiar with programming but still want to know what the accessibility of their website is like. Another option is FAE, which is by the University of Illinois. I checked this yesterday and their server is down, so if you try to go visit it, it's still down. It appears they have a problem right now. However, this is a spider crawler, and what I mean by that is you plug in your website URL, and their servers have a spider that crawls through the hyperlinks of your website, and it goes, okay, I'm on the home page. I'm going to click all of these links and scan all of these pages, and then I'm going to click the next link and scan all of that page and return all of the data throughout the website. So instead of going page by page by page by page, individually, you can have an entire data set of the issues you're finding on your website.
It's more enough not to leave.
Yeah. Also, for those who work at Rutgers, which is not on this scan, we have a professional scanner that we have specifically for Rutgers, which is why it's not on here. But if you're interested in that, please let me know. Another tool that I like to advise for people are the accessibility bookmarklets. What this is, it's a little bit of JavaScript code that you make into a bookmark on your browser. And when you click that bookmark, it generates highlighters on your page. So, for example, you want to see how your headings look, you can hit the heading things, and it puts an outline, and it labels it heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, and you can visually see how your site is laid out via this. You can do this for lists. You could do this for titles. You can do this for tables. You could do this for your images. And it sort of gives you that, like, you don't have to search through the code, and you can physically see how things are actually presented on your final design.
Can we just do, I know you're all going to kill me, can you just show an example of Wave? Can you just
Of Wave?
Just one?
Yeah.
You do it on yours, and I'll do it on mine. Just because I think it'll be helpful for you to see it in action.
Just want to Wave WebAIM. This keyboard is terrible.
No, it's not Wave. It's WebAIM.
Yeah. I don't remember any of the URLs, so I just
search for Wave.
Yeah, I'm just searching for Wave WebAIM, because if you search Wave, you're going to get a lot of other
Wave Web Accessibility Tool.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oops, because it won't let me command it.
So it's wave.webaim.org. I'm just texting it to our folks. Okay, so what address would you recommend us to try?
I have one that I don't know on the top of my head. It's absolutely terrible. Hey, who wants to be a dummy? What?
Which one should we do? Which Rutgers one is the best one?
Which one? A good one?
Yeah.
Think it's going to do well?
Which one?
That's going to do well?
Yeah.
No.
Yes, and you did that, and you're good with that. Biology.
Okay.
Rutgers.edu. Thank you, Eddie.
I don't know if it requires, okay, it doesn't require it.
Okay, so, I mean, we're not going to go through the entire test here, but this way you can see how easy it is to click on, you know, to see where the errors are. That's an H2 tag header.
Oh.
But that's okay, we'll fix it.
Yeah, it's going H4 to H2.
Yeah.
And there's an H, oh, it's empty? Why is it empty?
It's a long story.
It's okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's okay. So most websites you go to, you're going to find some errors and things.
Yeah, it's always going to happen.
Yeah.
So
but this way the group can see this is how it works.
And you can click into it, and it gives you, you know, what this means, why it matters, how to fix it, what this means in English. But it also references if you want to dive into the different rules of WCAG as well as the 508. I'm going to guess this is out of date, but because that was so recent. But again, it also shows the website. It labels all of your headers, your lists, your navs, what it's finding in there. But it also gives you the ability that you can see the website with absolutely no styling. So this is, if somebody decides to turn off the styling, you can see it that way. You could also see the website with alternative contrast, which you have to put in there, so I'm not actually going to dive into that.
Yeah, no. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you do no styles, you basically just see.
You just turn off the CSS.
Okay.
Which may or may break your website. It's fascinating to do that.
Is that a new template?
Yep. Yeah, this is with the new one. But those two errors, we actually have a fix for that. But we've been going through all of the sites. Everything that we have done in the past 6 months, I would say, we've been kind of going through with the site accessibility, the new template, to make sure it's as good as we can be. And we're going to keep making it better. So
yeah.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking about Jewish studies. We have on the right bar all the links. I don't know if that's something you're doing.
We haven't redone the Jewish studies yet from an accessibility standpoint, because we did that before the accessibility rules came out.
Things take time.
But it's on the plan.
So, another big thing that I want to make sure over, compliance also does not mean fully accessible. You can have the most compliant AAA website and your users might be completely unable to use it. And it's simply because compliance rules can be easily misinterpreted and misused by users. One of the most common ones I've seen is overusage of ARIA. Again, not going to go into it. ARIA is a labeling system that there's a code that can be used specifically for screen readers. Well, you can overuse it really easily. You can break it really easily. So you can also have bad content within an accessible website. You know, your framework can be as accessible as it can, and if your content providers aren't making the content accessible, then you're still having those issues. Another big thing I want to put forward is the scanners I put forward before can only pick up things within the code. They can only see what is placed in front of them. They can't do manual checks. So you need to make sure to do manual checking. The best way to do this, give yourself a task from A to B. Go from your home page and get to a certain point of your website, especially if you have anything that's like interactive, like a form, like a device or something, and see if you could do the following. Put away your mouse and see if you can tab through your website with just your tab to go forward, shift tab to go backwards, your arrow keys and your enter keys. Throw your mouse away, completely disable it, don't cheat, and see if you can do it. The next one, zoom your page to 200%. This is not like an arbitrary number I pulled out from there. The minimum ability in WCAG for zooming is up to 200%. Your website should still be usable. I have seen a lot of websites break the moment I hit the 200% mark. Either I can't access menus, or I can't access buttons, or the layout is completely toast. Also, check to see if you can do that task with no images. To make disabling images easier, there is a Chrome tool that's called Images On and Off. It is a little plugin that is an on-off switch, and you just flick it off, and it disables all the images. And the next one is do an auto movement test. Is there, while you're going through, is there anything moving for more than 5 seconds? And if it is, can you pause it or stop it. This includes things that technically only move every few seconds but are going on forever, like rotating carousels, like automatic movies. I have to say, I have to put in my hand that is the most important test because that affects me the most. Because I hate rotating carousels. I can't read anything if something's moving in the background. I legitimately can't read it because my eyes are like, there's movement. Okay, there's movement. There's movement. That is actually how my brain works. So that's usually why I disable images the moment I get on a website that has an autoplay or something. Well, it can't move if it doesn't exist.
Can you please excuse me?
That's fine. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's really good. Can't wait to get back to work and make some changes.
Make some accessibility changes.
Yeah.
Actually,
Can we wrap it up?
Yeah, this was the last slide. I just want to say, don't get overwhelmed. Accessibility is pretty big. It's pretty scary for web development. One portion at a time, but every little step counts. Every little movement counts, right? Yeah, the rest of my slides were just the hyperlinks, so that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone have any quick questions for Christine for follow-up?
If at any point you have future questions too, my contact information is also on the sheet.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending, and we're going to make sure to put this recording up online. I'm going to stop the recording right now. And the presentation will go up online. Please check back on joomlaUsersNJ.com if you want to find out about other meetings. We'll probably have another meeting. What month are we in? We're
at the end of May.
Yeah, probably. We may have one in July or August, or if not, we'll wait till September. I know on my head, I want to know what's in Joomla 4.0. That's kind of a big thing for me. What?
When is that?
Soon. That's exactly. I don't know. So anyway, I want to know. So sometimes I can get a presenter from Europe or something like that to present for us and that type of thing. But if anyone has any topics or something that is of interest to them that pertains to Joomla, or if you have an expert, then you know of someone that can help us with it, you know, that would be great. So, and just for those of you that are virtual, I'm going to also email you the listing that Christine gave us, so that way you'll have access to that too, because they were just asking me questions. So, is there anything else? Any topics you want for the next meeting, please send me an email, and I can find experts from all over the world that will talk for us. We've done that before. So, thank you, and thank you very much for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Yes. All right. Let me do